My name is Ryan James Greavy. I am 23 years old, and I am going to explore my genogram a little bit. So, I have a decent amount of family members on here. My dad's side is much bigger than my mom's side, but I want to explore all of them a little bit. So, with patterns of functioning, I myself feel like a caregiver sometimes for my parents due to emotional avoidance. To expand on that a little bit, uh, my dad himself is quite emotionally avoidant. He struggles with alcohol abuse and he also has prostate cancer, which doesn't make him emotionally avoidant, but the alcohol abuse does, and we'll get into that later. But my dad has been emotionally avoidant with my mom and myself for a long time now. So in some ways, I feel like a caregiver between both of them. And I've been able to get a deeper look into why that is through exploring my genogram. So I'm going to start on my dad's side first. So let's hope you can see this. This is my father's brother, Matthew. He passed when he was 6 years old in 1966, a really long time ago. My dad was really close with him when he was a little boy, and Matthew drowned. After this, my father's side of the family became extremely distant with each other. A lot of them still don't talk today, but back then it was a very slow process. My dad became especially distant with Joseph, who, like my father, also struggles with alcohol abuse. And the rest of the family has also become extremely distant with Joseph. The only person who I guess is close with Joseph is his wife. Even his kids I have here have become distant, and one is even hostile towards him. And this was kind of a big catalyst with my dad's side of the family where um, they have become very disengaged. Um, as a child, I never saw my dad's side of the family. And when I would ask why this was, my father would get very emotional, sometimes angry, and he would say, "Oh, we don't talk to them." That's all he would say, and I never understood why. But now through this assignment, I do a bit more. They really do seem chaotically disengaged, with little interaction, emotional separateness, and private lives, and very limited leadership. There's no leadership. Um, my Aunt Irene and my Aunt Carolyn, both very independent people, are close with each other, but that's it. I would say that's the most leadership within my family. They once, a lifetime ago, tried to initiate um, a family bond to get out of this disengaged stage, but they did not succeed in that. And thus, my dad's side of the family has just become increasingly detached. Um, my father also does not handle stress well. He shuns people away when times get hard, which has happened with Joseph, who I have distant, as well as Amber, who he is hostile with. Um, he had a falling out with both of them, but he has not even tried to mend this, and neither have they. So they have become emotionally distant. And they haven't talked to each other in over a decade. On my mom's side, though, I found this interesting. Let's see if I can get a better angle of this. So I have my grandparents, and I have the squiggly line means the camera means hostile. My grandmother and grandfather divorced when my mom was very young, and she was very distant from her father. But this divorce and this distance made my mother's bond with my grandmother unbelievable. She had an amazing mother, she has, who raised her to be anything but emotionally detached. My mother has formed countless bonds, friendships she still holds today, and has done the same with me as I am extremely close with her. She's not distant with anyone and tries to mend difficult relationships if she can, and usually she does. And that trait I think she took from her mother. So, in a way, my grandfather's divorced from my grandmother, and my grandfather also struggles with alcohol abuse, which I will also get to later. But with the alcohol abuse, you can kind of start to see a pattern with a lot of negativity, the negative moments in my family. My grandfather's divorce, my grandmother has made my mother and my grandmother's bond so great that I do believe they have become better people from it. They have erased this negativity from their life, and they have risen through that to become so engaged with each other and so engaged with family and friends. So now I want to talk a little bit about patterns of relationships. So, like I said, my dad's side of the family is very distant with each other, and my father's parents passed over I can't get an angle on this, 2 decades ago. This was a long time ago. And I believe they were the glue holding my family together. So my grandfather passed in 1986, and my grandmother passed in 2000. Um, I would say it was around 2000 where my father's family started to become really disengaged, truly disengaged, where my father's brother Joseph began to not talk to people. Um, Children had falling outs with each other, such as Bethany and Sarah, who are distant, as well as Patrick with Joseph, who are also distant. And I believe through the distance of my father's family, this was passed down to myself with my father's relationship to myself and my mother. Um, we are distant. Both of us, I would say, are distant with my dad. My dad lives with my mom, but they don't really talk much. They don't have much to talk about at all. And I personally don't even really speak to my dad that much. I speak to him when I go home, but he's just very emotionally distant. He he's not very good at keeping relationships, and you have to wonder, you know, the glue that was holding his family together is no longer there. And after that happened, so much of the family became distant. And so much of the family has also not been able to mend these distant relationships or has not tried and have become emotionally detached. So, this, I would say, is the complete opposite of enmeshed. My father's side of the family has their own little system. They do not have a big system at all. They don't talk to each other. Even the kids, cousins, don't even talk to each other. My cousins. They don't see each other. A lot of my family, my dad's side, lives in different states. Um, they don't live in the hometown anymore. So this has caused just a individual system that has really no hierarchy at all. And my dad is close. Let's see if I can get up. My dad is close with a few of my older cousins. So this is Andy, who is Asian. He's the only non-white person in my family, and Michael, who are both in the age ranges of 30, but they're close because my dad likes sports and they like sports. My dad likes movies, they like movies. If my dad doesn't have something in common with someone, it seems like he doesn't really get close with them. Other than that, my dad isn't close with anyone in his family. So I think that pattern has really been passed down to myself and my father, and especially my mom and my dad, where my dad is very emotionally detached. Um, Now, on the other hand, my grandmother and, my grandmother and my mother are basically enmeshed. They talk the same, they like the same stuff, worry about the same things, go to the same places, watch the same things, and so on. They are basically the same exact people. My grandmother is very protective of my mother, and I have to think all of this stems from my grandfather, who was an abusive alcoholic and who um, left. He left when my mom was so young. And all my mom and my grandma had were each other. They didn't have anyone else. And my mother and father are on the best terms. My mom demands an unusual closeness with me, and I think this can be from trauma with her father, relationship with her father, as well as the closeness with her mother, because they are literally the same person. They are with each other all the time, and they have been like that since I was alive and before that, because I've asked them, and they are so close. That closeness has not gone anywhere. Um, but you have to think why they're so close, why they act the exact same. And I do think that's because of my alcoholic, abusive grandfather, who really kind of helped form that bond between my grandmother and my mother. So, going on to patterns of position, the patterns of position are a bit more varied. Like I said earlier, a lot of my dad's side of the family, here's the key. You can kind of see where the lines are going. A lot of my dad's side of the family have been very independent and on their own. Both of my aunts, Irene and Carolyn, have been completely independent since they were young, have traveled to work their entire life, basically do not talk to any of the other brothers. So they're doing their own thing. They have their own little system going on. Two of my dad's brothers, Peter and Richard, live in completely other states where they grew up. Peter lives in Michigan. Richard lives in Arizona. They have their own little system going on. And like I said before, they don't really communicate with the outside family. Um, I do know that Peter used to act as a caregiver to my brother, or sorry, to my dad, Peter's brother. But that changed after Matthew died, and the catalyst to this disengagement kind of occurred. Um, I also think it's interesting when my father has talked about his father, he really looked up to him. But he has also stated that my grandfather, right here, was very emotionally distant and strict, and my dad looked up to him very much. So you have to think that because my dad is exactly like that, my dad is very strict and emotionally distant. He really looked up to his father and took that down generation to generation. Because my aunt and my two aunts are not like that. They're very loose, easygoing. So I think that's very interesting, and I think that's why he acts similar. And on my mom's side, it's kind of the same situation. Sorry, I can't really get good angles of this. It's kind of the same thing where it's just my mom and grandma, and they have always seen each other as equals while I've been alive. So it's different, but it's the same in that patterns of position. My dad's side of the family, own thing, don't really have a system at all, while my grandmother and mom have a very tight knit system of this enmeshed qualities where their system is they look out for each other and they do everything for each other. And that bond has emotionally come down to me, where I am very close to my mother and I'm very close to my grandmother, but I'm not that close to my dad and I'm not that close with his side of the family. So now I want to talk a little bit about balance. I know that my Aunt Irene and my Aunt Carolyn helped balance my dad's family, but like I said, they moved away, and there was no balance after that. Matthew was really the catalyst to everything going wrong with the balance in my dad's family. And my dad's family is huge, so you would think that someone would reach out, but he only speaks to his brothers like once a month, the ones that he's close to, and the ones that he's not that close to, maybe once a year. Joseph, right here, he hasn't spoken to in years, and neither have a lot of the others. I have distant for Irene and Carolyn. They have not talked to him for a long time. Not exactly sure how long, but Bethany, his daughter, doesn't talk to him anymore, as well as Patrick, who is the spouse of one of the kids, does not want to talk to him anymore. So the balance in my dad's side is very, very chaotically disengaged, while my mom's side is more interesting. So the balance on my mom's side has shifted. My grandmother is aging. She is 84 years old. My mom is not a spring chicken either. She's 60 years old. So my mom has kind of come into a caretaker role. Her role has shifted quickly and harshly after so many decades of the other way around, where my grandmother took care of her with every fiber of her breath. While I still believe currently this is a balanced system because my grandmother can take care of herself, I do believe in the next few years it will be very imbalanced as my grandmother continues to age. My mom is 60 and her health is not great either, so I am anticipating the same thing to be passed down to me, where my mother is a caretaker currently for my grandmother, and in I don't know how many years or decades, I will do the same thing where I will then become the caretaker for my mother. And maybe my father too. My father is more independent and seems to do things, seems to be very distant in that he doesn't want help or assistance with things. But so I want to talk about stages of development quickly. So interesting parts is that my grandfather was very successful. He was the breadwinner of his family, and I know my dad looked up to him very much. And my dad is the breadwinner of my family, but he needs that to be. He's one of those people where I don't think he wants my mom to make more money than him or be more successful than him. I think he needs to be the breadwinner. And My mom, on the other hand, doesn't really care about that stuff. And as for the rest of my dad's family, I know that they're similar in that the men in the family are very much the breadwinners. I know especially Peter is very successful. He's the breadwinner. Richard is successful. I think he's a business owner. Joseph, I'm not exactly sure, but Carolyn and Irene are also very successful. And I think they all really looked up to their parents in that way. Um, like my mom and or like me and my mom, uh, my grandmother and my mom have a extremely tight knit relationship, and I think this has kind of come down to me where my mom is very overprotective of me. She, I think, is feeling an empty nest situation. She has been for the last few years because I'm now living in Wisconsin. She lives in Indiana, um, and she is very overprotective of me. She calls me all the time. She really misses me. She makes sure I have everything under control. And on the other hand, my dad doesn't really care about this. He actually told me that leaving the house has helped my parents' relationship, which I thought was interesting. But this also has to do something with, I think, my mom is being overprotective of me because she is now very overprotective of my grandmother in that carryover role. In that My mom is definitely feeling burnout from the caregiver role. My mom is 60. My parents are 60. They're not very financially well. They're also not very healthy, and all the stress is causing them to kind of struggle. Um, Now, I want to talk about me a little bit. Now, I have Ryan and Amna here. Um, Now, I myself am also transitioning. I transitioned from being single to being in love, as I have down here, with Amna, and now I live with her. That is a big transition. I have moved states, and I am going to move states again eventually. And we have also been talking about getting engaged, which is a huge step up in the development within my family. That is something that I didn't think was ever going to happen. So that has been a very wild ride. And I also have three cats. I never had pets when I was young. And now that might seem silly, but these cats have made me really change my perception on a lot of things. Now I want to talk about a little bit what makes my family unique. So um, I think the biggest thing is that my dad's side of the family is so massive, but they don't talk to each other at all, and they all struggle with emotional distance. You would think that one of them at least, reaches out and tries to fix something, but they never do. At least according to my dad, they don't try and work things out, and I don't think my dad wants them to. I think he's okay with his own little island that he's in, and I know my aunts are as well. My aunts are very happy and well off, and they don't really seem to care about family that much, at least outside family, other than their own. Like I said, they have their own little systems now. And it's also interesting because there's a lot of mental health disorders throughout my father's side, too. My Aunt Irene struggles with depression. Peter struggles with hypertension. Uh, Robin struggles with anxiety, and Joseph struggles with alcohol abuse. Michael also struggles with anxiety. Now, of course, everyone struggles with something, or at least, a lot of people struggle with something. But I wonder if the emotional distance of all this uh, is affecting them in those ways. And on my mother's side, I think it's very unique because, like me, I'm an only child. My mother was an only child. And my mother and my grandmother's relationship is so like brother and sister, or sister and sister, where they are just so close. Um, and they have unbreaking bonds. They truly do. And I do think that my grandfather, who struggled with alcohol abuse like my dad, and has kind of pushed his family away, really did strengthen the bond of my grandmother and mom. And I think in a way they're grateful for what happened back then, which I think is unique. You wouldn't think people would be grateful for an abusive alcoholic, but it has pushed them to be so close with each other My grandmother, 84, my mom, 60. So they've had a lot of time together, and they have grown so much during that time. Okay, so now I want to talk about important issues and events that have impacted me. I'm going to do this from a strength-based perspective, and there's a lot on here. A lot of negatives that I can turn to positives, but also a lot of positives. So my grandmother, I have up here. I have her being really close to my mom, and I have me being really close to my mom. The She has been the most important person in my life. She has taught me everything I know, and she has made me into who I am today. And that also goes for my mom as well. They've taught me all my values. They've taught me everything, and they are the reasons why I want to be a counselor. They want to help people. They just want to help strengthen people and lift them up. And that is why I think my mom tries so hard to mend relationships and keep those emotional relationships. Um, Another thing, like I said earlier, and this is the most damning thing I think, is that my grandfather and my father both really struggle with alcohol abuse. This has caused a lot of damage in my family. It has caused damage, especially with my mom. And my mom really worried about this with me. She was worried that I would also be alcohol abuse. And I have taken an approach where I recognize this, and I recognize my mom's fears, and I recognize what it has done to my family, and I have done everything in my power to eliminate it from my life. I don't think it's a good thing, and I have taken an approach where I don't do it, and I think that has really strengthened my life. It has also given me a new perspective on alcohol abuse, and how it can impact families. Another thing, meeting Amna has really changed my worldview and changed my perception of everything from love to culture. And I think that's really made me a better person and a better counselor, because she went into counseling, and I always wanted to help people, but I didn't know much about counseling. So I think meeting her has really changed my journey in life. And I'm lucky for that. And another thing is, I rarely see my family. I don't see my dad's side of the family ever. Like I said earlier, I haven't seen them in years, maybe even decades at this point, other than my aunts who I do talk to. But I think this, in a way, even though it was hard as a kid not knowing my family, I think growing up, uh, not seeing my family, both and as an independent only child, has made me comfortable with myself and comfortable with who I am and the independence that I have. I'm an extremely independent person. I'm an extremely open person. I want to talk about emotions. I want to talk about what's going on. I'm okay with not showing masculinity. And I think that has to do with my independence in a way, because I do everything from eating at restaurants alone to going to music festivals alone to traveling alone. And I know for a lot of people that can be hard. But for me, I think not seeing my family as a kid has made me so comfortable with my independence. So in a way, I'm kind of thankful for that. Would I like to know my family? Of course I would. But I'm thankful for the independence that I have gained from this. So now I want to talk a little bit about triangles. So I'm going to do my dad, my mom, and I first. So my dad, my mom, and I feel like I am the catalyst in this triangle, and that throughout my life I have engaged with them when they are fighting or when they are having issues, which looking back probably isn't the best thing to do. But I think this has kind of been something that has not really stopped them from fighting, but has gone in and changed the dynamic of it. And my mom as well has brought me into arguments before, kind of used me before, which she regrets. My dad has done the same exact thing. So I am a triangle in that they bring me into their conflicts to kind of settle it in a way, or to bring it down a bit. I have a triangle with myself, Amna, and my cat, Barry. I met Barry the same exact time as I met Amna, and I'm very grateful for that. Um, Barry really calms us down. Barry, when we're not having a good moment, Barry helps us kind of come back into this space a little bit, and we think about him when we're having an argument. Same thing with myself, Bethany, and Sarah. These are my cousins who are distant from each other. I have reached out to them, and I have actually tried to talk to them about this, and they have kind of brought me in before, um, especially when they're fighting or not good with each other. And I think this is an important triangle. Um, so I want to talk about me a little bit. Um, I myself, I'm a white male, middle class. Religious wise, my grandmother was very religious, but my dad's side really is not religious, and I think this has influenced me a little bit. I wouldn't say I'm agnostic, but I do keep prayer in the back of my mind because of my grandmother. And I also want to talk about a little bit about how important Matthew's death was, in that it sent a ripple into my family. And since the late 60s, they have been so distant and disengaged. And this pattern has gone down to their kids as well. Like I said, Bethany and Sarah are disengaged with each other. Patrick doesn't really talk to Joseph. And some of the other kids, such as Amber, is hostile with my father. Um, just this pattern of disengagement and hostility seems to continue, and it has, I think, continued with my father and myself's relationship. So, to conclude my genogram, I want to talk about a few of my biggest takeaways. My biggest takeaway is definitely substance abuse, in that my dad and my grandfather struggled with substance abuse, in that it really changed uh, the way that my family has operated. It changed how my grandmother and my mother operate. It has changed how myself, my mom, and my dad's relationship. It has caused a lot of hiccups in a relationship. And I've seen the damage that has been done, especially through my father with this. And because of this, I really want to focus on alcohol abuse in the future. I think that it's something that's so important. And while I do think that has a national focus on it, I want to bring awareness to it more and how it can really affect families. So because of this, I want to kind of engage myself more with SAMHSA, which deals with alcohol abuse. And Other than this, I'm also interested in role reversal because, like I said earlier, my mom and my grandmother, my mom is basically a caregiver for my grandmother at this point. Um, and I do believe that at some point this will occur with me. I do believe that I will have to become a caregiver to my mother. And I really didn't think about that much before the genogram. So I want to learn more about how that can affect clients and how, that's a lot of stress. My mom is under huge stress right now. How that can affect socioeconomic stress, how that can affect just at home stress, family stress, culture stress, everything from that, because a role reversal is really a changing of the guards in a weird way. Um, I think both of these things are kind of triggers for me as well, especially alcohol abuse and emotional abuse. I think that could really lead to countertransference. I've had many situations with my father that have not been pleasant through alcohol usage and emotional neglect, and I see how much of this could have been caused by the patterns within my family. And I feel like if I'm in a session with someone who is discussing some of the things that I've gone through within my life, I could engage in countertransference. So I really have to be careful of that because we are obviously there for the client and their needs, and I don't want to interject my own life into theirs. Um, Lastly, the most salient point or the biggest thing I took away is that I have such a big family, yet they are so disconnected. I have so many keys and patterns on here that are just negative, depression, distance, hostile, everything, divorce, and I do wish they could be more connected. I learned how much family and events can change dynamics. Matthew's death was a catalyst for seemingly all the negative aspects of my dad's side, while my grandfather and grandmother's divorce was a catalyst that led to an unbreakable bond with my mother, my grandmother, and later myself. So I think just how moments can change a family's dynamic is so important. And I also believe that even through all these big moments, the major component that really seems to affect my family and has affected both my immediate family, so myself, my mom, my dad, as well as my dad's family as a whole and my mom's family as a whole, is alcohol abuse. That is the biggest recurring thing. There has been so much hardship in my family through alcohol abuse. There really has. I am glad that my mother and grandmother have become stronger through that, but I do know that it was very difficult when they were young. And my mom has gone through so much with alcohol abuse, and so have I at this point. It's a really scary thing, and I think that is the biggest takeaway of how alcohol abuse just goes through my family on both sides. It's so prevalent. Even with Joseph, I have Joseph here who is basically just distant with every single person in my family at this point, and he also struggles with alcohol abuse. So it's like it's scary to think about, but I really want to continue the strength-based approach of me not engaging in that, and hopefully I can be the best person I can be in the future. So that is everything. This is my genogram. Wish I could get a better angle of the lighting, but it's really tough. But anyways, thank you.